Lucky to be fortunate enough to be able to pay for what my son needs. I'm lucky that I have friends that are willing to tell me painful stories about what they have gone through so that I can learn from that.
And the cost to our society on a personal level and a larger economic level is huge. And it's just simply unacceptable that we have numbers of 37% of our students reading at proficient levels.
Really, we're here because we think the problem can get solved.
It is not hard to figure out who these kids are. You can see it in kindergarten through district-wide screening. You use the data. You look at the students. You don't look at the families they come from. You don't look at the language spoken at home. You don't look at the color of their skin.
But there's a heck of a lot of people who are not in this room today who are completely unable, and I think we really have a social obligation to try to bring this diversity of learning systems into the schools and make them available for those kids.
And it is our responsibility as the adults in this community to give all children the opportunity to learn to read, because it is their right.
I don't want it to have to be about luck and about money. And so I guess what I really learned today is that I hope something's done sooner than later.
So at the time was going to Winona State University to get my elementary ed and my special ed licensures, which I do have. In those classes, I never learned anything about how to teach reading, ever.
In order to pick or design appropriate curriculum for classrooms, it is profoundly important that teachers have training that they need. Our son was in a reading program for 3 years that the manufacturer rep told us was inappropriate to meet my son's needs.
It's important for the teachers to have the absolute understanding of what the language is, how it's structured, so they can identify when the kids are having problems in a way that they can intervene with it before it becomes a lifelong problem.
And we actually taught those students, 30 of them per year, it's a year-long graduate credit course still going on, how to teach reading. And those teachers said that they were ready to drop out of education program because it was worthless until they took our class.
And I think the thing that we hear overwhelmingly in our evaluations from the teachers is why haven't I learned this in my undergrad programs?
We are teaching them the structure of the English language. And many of those teachers said, why didn't I ever learn this before?
For the sake of the state and the sake of the whole educational system, it's really important to realize that we need to make the investment in certifying our teachers.
It doesn't seem fair that the school district should have to pay for it when the teachers should be coming in knowing how to do it ahead of time.
Now everyone today is saying like 30%. If you have about 30% of kids in every classroom, it's not a small number, and that the teachers really should know how to deal with such a large number of students.
What would a child say? Well, this is Kitty. He's learned Kitty. But an underlying structure rule of the language is that C before I, E, or Y always says, so we have to teach this explicitly as well. Teachers coming out of our programs don't know this.
You see on the chart, those kids don't fail in reading. They don't have to, and they shouldn't have to, because they should be honored as learners.
Underlying structures of language are not being addressed in our teacher education programs. I can say that unequivocally.
It's mainly learning the structure of the language, because if teachers don't know the sounds, the correct sounds that the language makes, if they don't know that those sounds map to letters, it'll be very hard for them to teach children how to read.
And I'll tell you, of those, the 60% not reading at proficiency, only 10% of them will have a diagnosed learning disability, a reading disability. 90% of our kids who are not reading at grade level are instructional casualties. Instructional casualties. Okay, and until we correct that, and until our higher ed sees that and does something about it, we are doomed.
He scored 99 percentile on the Metropolitan 8 for the diligent, hardworking teachers. He's a real success for, he could have been pulled out, he could have been in special education, but they stuck with him. They worked through all of these things and all these techniques that I've heard all these women talk about today, and they really stuck by him.
Once she figured out that those sounds could be put together to make a word, it was just like, she just took off.
And we were driving home. She was a third grader. She had basically was a non-reader. And we took the Penn Avenue exit off of Interstate 394, and she read the sign one way. And I will obviously never forget it.
5 days a week, 1 hour a day, to work with his reading tutor. During that time, he was able to make 1.5 years worth of progress. He still struggles with fluency today, but he reads at grade level.
She found success almost immediately, and maybe more importantly, she rediscovered her sense of self-worth as she quickly began to learn to read. In fact, she gained nearly 3 full academic years in reading.
We made the commitment, and within the first week at Linda Bell, we saw the miracle start to happen.
Through this time, we were still working with the teacher, or with the tutor, and she was making very, very big gains and progress.
And after only 18 hours of tutoring, it was for 18 lessons, 1 hour each lesson, I gained 1 year and, I think it was 1 year and 2 months just for 18 hours, other than 3 months for a whole year of school.
It's such a simple thing, but it's so powerful to him to be able to read outside the car and partake in our drive home.
I did this through 2nd grade. Then around 3rd grade, I started to pick up really fast, like I was on an assembly line. And by the end of 3rd grade, I was reading at grade level. And then by the end of 5th grade, my teacher gave a comprehension test and found I was reading at 9th grade level.
He's been very successful. He too scored in the 99th percentile on his SATs in the reading. He'll be able to do whatever he wants to do now.
Today I can read anything, but it takes me a longer time than some of my friends.
He now knows that he's good at math because he couldn't read the instructions. He couldn't read the word problems.
And he said, "This is the best thing I ever did because now I get it. I have the tools, Mom. I'm really, really, really getting it."
And he didn't want to go to bed. Can't we just read 5 more minutes? Can't we read 5 more minutes? You know, he'd ask his brother, "What do you want to learn about?" And my husband and I stood at the doorway and just looked at each other and couldn't believe that we were seeing what we were seeing.
And now she's doing great. She's reading at grade level and moving on and beyond grade level.
Even the students that are being taught are so excited. Why didn't I learn this before? The student that I'm teaching now at the Reading Center, when we get to the sound PH, he says, "Hey, that's from the Greek," and he gets so excited.
We have trouble getting our kids to qualify for special ed in our district because we're teaching them so well. They don't qualify. We barely get kids to qualify for Title I.
And then by 5th grade, when he could see that he could make progress in reading, I got my son back.